Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: U.S. and Chinese officials meeting in London amid a rare earth mineral standoff. After a Trump-Xi call, Beijing vows to resume shipments, but Washington says it's too slow. Can the talks save the 90-day tariff truce? Millions of cars hanging in the balance. Automakers warning China's strict export controls on rare earth magnets could halt production, risking a third major supply chain shock in 5 years. Trade talks between the U.S. and China are back on, but critics say Beijing has broken promises before. Will a deal mean real progress or just more smoke and mirrors?
In order for this agreement to have any kind of teeth, it actually is going to have some provisions that will punish China for not following the agreement.
And China's exports to the U.S. are tumbling, down 35% in May, marking the steepest drop in over 5 years. The news is landing just as U.S. and Chinese officials sit down for trade talks in London. U.S.-China trade tensions back in the spotlight. Senior officials from both sides are in London for a second round of trade talks since the Trump administration rolled out its global tariff policy. Front and center in the negotiations, export controls. The White House is zeroing in on China's tight grip on rare earth minerals. The restrictions are wreaking havoc on global supply chains, hitting everything from automakers to aerospace and defense industries. Leading the U.S. delegation are Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. China's delegation is led by Vice Premier He Lifeng. The talks follow last week's phone call between President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Trump said Xi agreed to resume rare earth exports to the U.S. Soon after, China reportedly granted temporary licenses to suppliers serving America's top automakers. But some officials in Washington are still skeptical. Kevin Hassett, chair of the White House's Council of Economic Advisors, says China has been dragging its feet on rare earth shipments. Speaking to CNBC ahead of the London talks, he says the meeting's purpose is to make sure that China is serious. Hassett says the goal is straightforward: secure a handshake deal that immediately eases China's export controls and restores rare earth shipments in full. Only then can broader trade talks move forward. Adding to the tension, last month, the U.S. Commerce Department issued a global ban on certain AI chips from the Chinese tech giant Huawei. Economic pressure is mounting in China. Meanwhile, Washington is revoking student visas for some Chinese nationals, a move some see as another lever testing Beijing's tough stance. But with China still controlling 90% of the global rare earth supply chain, many say a major policy shift seems unlikely. Trump recently posted on Truth Social saying, quote, "It was extremely hard to make a deal with Xi." So can the London talks put the 90-day tariff truce back on track? We're watching closely and we'll keep you updated. Rare earth production is high on the agenda at the U.S.-China negotiation table. Car executives are concerned that China's tight export controls on rare earth magnets, essential for making cars, could bring production to a halt. Here's more.
Cars today use rare earth-based motors in dozens of components. They include side mirrors, speakers, oil pumps, wipers, and sensors for fuel leakage and braking sensors. Electric vehicles use more rare earths than combustion engine cars. Industry leaders are worried that the situation could become the third massive supply chain shock in 5 years. A semiconductor shortage wiped out millions of cars from production plans between 2021 and 2023. Before that, the pandemic shut factories for weeks. This time, as the rare earths bottleneck tightens, the industry has few good options. That's because China dominates the market. It controls around 70% of global rare earths mining, 85% of refining capacity, and about 90% of rare earths metal alloy and magnet production, according to industry data. The fate of automakers' assembly lines has been left to a small team of Chinese bureaucrats as it reviews hundreds of applications for export permits. In Europe, the region's Auto Supplier Association says several plants have already shut down, with more outages coming.
As U.S. and Chinese officials are holding trade talks in London, another sign of warming ties is unfolding. U.S. plane maker Boeing is resuming deliveries to Chinese customers. A new Boeing 737 MAX touched down there on Monday. Beijing had halted delivery of new planes in April, reacting to high U.S. tariffs. At least 3 737 MAX jets previously sent to China were even flown back to the U.S. How can the U.S. help small businesses compete against China's unfair trade practices? To discuss, NTD's Steve Lance sat down with Republican Texas Congresswoman Beth Van Doon. Take a look.
On the topic of small businesses, following President Trump's call with the CCP leader Xi Jinping, there's now talk of renewed U.S.-China trade negotiations. What kind of measures could help the American small business compete, especially given the possibility of a continued influx of cheap goods from China?
We have a regulatory authority in the federal government that doesn't seem to recognize the fact that if you strap their hands behind their back of private business in the U.S., they cannot compete globally. And on top of that, then we end up importing goods that could be produced in the U.S. from other countries that don't pay any type of penalty at all. So it's a double whammy to our businesses that invest and hire in the U.S. So I have a level the playing field act that I've introduced that actually will go after places like China that are taking their goods, avoiding tariffs by taking their sticker off, going to another country. You know, instead of a made in China sticker, now it has a made in Mexico sticker that are really, really harming our small businesses. These are businesses that want to be able to compete. They want to be able to sell in their neighborhoods. And it's impossible when you've got the unfair regulatory authorities here that from the Democrat perspective, just strangle them. And then we are importing, things that don't have the regulatory authority, that are made with child labor, and that don't have to have a fair playing field. So this is, I think, part of the tariff war and the discussions that Trump is having with China. Now, I am optimistic about what that means, but in order for this agreement to have any kind of teeth, it actually is going to have some provisions that will punish China for not following the agreement. Because we've seen far too often is China comes to the table, they come to an agreement, and then they walk away and they don't follow it.
China's exports to the U.S. dropping 35% in May. It's the sharpest drop in more than 5 years. The figures landed Monday, hours before trade talks between the U.S. and China kicked off in London. The meeting follows a recent phone call between President Trump and Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping. China's exports to the U.S. plunged from $44 billion last May to nearly $29 billion this year, a sharp 35% drop. Meanwhile, China's imports from the U.S. fell by roughly 7%. But tensions go beyond tariffs. The U.S. has banned high-tech semiconductor exports to China, while China has cut rare earth shipments. According to customs data, rare earth exports to the U.S. are down nearly 21% so far this year. Tensions have also escalated over student visas as Washington cracks down on Chinese students amid espionage concerns related to U.S. military and technology. As both sides prepare for trade talks in London, a lasting truce remains uncertain. How does the U.S. gather intelligence from China? The director of the CIA recently revealed a strategy. The agency uses Mandarin language operations on the dark web. Let's dive in.
The way to counter China is to go on offense. And so we released 2 Mandarin-speaking videos to the Chinese people, inviting them to contact us through the dark web, because a lot of the people in China are not happy with what's happening, and they can be, great sources of intelligence for us.
CIA Director John Ratcliffe was speaking to Lara Trump on Fox News. He said the CIA plans to have more people inside China gathering intelligence. The information will keep the U.S. government aware of the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. He said more data will go to the president to give him an advantage when dealing with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. On the show, he also spoke of efforts to depoliticize the CIA and have it refocus on its mission of intelligence gathering. He told Lara Trump, "We're going to get back to what made the CIA great."
As economic pressures rise, Canada is walking a diplomatic tightrope between 2 global superpowers. On Thursday, Prime Minister Mark Carney held direct talks with China's Premier Qiang, while continuing steady communication with U.S. President Donald Trump following last month's Washington visit. Here's more.
The phone call, confirmed by both sides, comes months after the tariff war between Canada and China began last October. Chinese state media said Li told Canada there's no fundamental conflict between the two countries and that China's willing to work on solutions. But analysts say China is using Canada as a bargaining chip in its bigger trade fight with the U.S., especially after the recent tariff truce in Geneva. Less than a month after that deal, President Trump accused China of breaking the agreement. He then spoke directly with the Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. Trump called it a positive talk, but it's still unclear if anything concrete came from it. Meanwhile, Canada is caught in the crossfire. U.S. tariffs have hit Canadian auto exports hard. Statistics Canada says the country's trade deficit just hit a record $5.2 billion. On the flip side, Canada's exports to China, the UK, and others are at all-time highs. As China looks to smooth its relationship with Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney is pushing for a new trade deal with the U.S. ahead of the G7 summit in Canada this June. President Trump is expected to attend. Canada's industry minister says Carney and Trump have stayed in regular contact since last month's White House visit.
For the first time, a Chinese carrier has crossed what's called the second island chain, a crucial U.S. defense line in the Pacific Ocean. Over the weekend, Japan's defense ministry says China's Liaoning aircraft carrier sailed near the strategic island of Iwo Jima. It also entered Japan's exclusive economic zone. Iwo Jima is just about 800 miles north of the U.S. territory of Guam.
The Japanese government's chief cabinet secretary said Japan would strengthen surveillance and gather necessary information. He also said, without elaborating, that Japan has sent an appropriate message to China. A statement by Japan's joint staff said the Liaoning was accompanied by other ships and sailed within Japan's exclusive economic zone near a remote island east of Iwo Jima. Japan also confirmed Chinese fighter jets and helicopters took off and landed from the Liaoning in waters southeast of Iwo Jima yesterday.
The island of Iwo Jima is strategically important if a conflict breaks out between China and Taiwan and the U.S. comes to Taiwan's aid. Located between Guam and Taiwan, the island could serve as a crucial air base for U.S. military flights. During World War II, Iwo Jima already played this role when the U.S. fought Japan. Coming up, heavy flooding swept through southern China over the weekend, with rainfall setting new records in many areas. While heavy flooding hits the south, drought scorches the northern wheat belt, causing yields to drop. And tensions flare between President Trump and Elon Musk. Could the strain push America closer to Russia and give China the upper hand? Two experts weigh in. That and more in just a minute here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Flood season is kicking in across southern China, while drought continues in parts of the north. Heavy flooding hit southern China over the weekend, with rainfall in many areas setting new records. Here's more.
In southern China's Hunan province, heavy flooding completely submerged several cities over the weekend.
It's too much, too much. It's too much, too much. It's flooding. It's really flooding bad.
Rainfall set new records in many areas. Hunan's capital city, Changsha, recorded almost 4 inches of rain in 1 hour. And just north, the city of Yuanzhang saw 4.5 inches in 1 hour. Area residents reacted as roads turned into rivers and flood waters rolled through the streets, just like sea waves.
Oh my goodness, I feel like I'm driving in the sea. Wow.
Wow, look this way, look.
As of 7 p.m. Monday Beijing time, Chinese authorities have not yet released any information on casualties or other damages. This week, southern China could be hit by the first typhoon of the year, which could make landfall and bring another round of heavy rainfall. Reporting from Taiwan, Joy Chu, NTD News.
In parts of China, drought has baked the wheat belt, causing yields to drop and worrying the farmers who depend on the land. Let's take a closer look.
Combine harvesters plow through the parched wheat fields of China's northwestern Shaanxi province. But local farmer Xiao Yaping knows there is little to celebrate. Some of her crop is still tinged with green, in a sign it hasn't fully ripened. and she expects she'll only get half the ton of wheat her 2/3 of an acre plot usually yields.
Normally, each spikelet would grow 4 or 5 grains, but look at this. This year it's only 1 or 2. That's a drop in yield.
Parts of China's wheat belt in Shaanxi and Henan provinces have been hit hard by hot, dry weather, with the sun baking the soil into cracked slabs and scorching the wheat before it could ripen. Zhao says she's not seen a drought this bad in her 20 years of farming. Last month, Shaanxi recorded its highest average temperatures since records began in 1961. While official figures are still some 6 weeks away, more than a dozen farmers in the area told Reuters of losses and small harvests, down as much as half for some. In some parts of the province, the drought was so bad farmers brought the harvest forward by a week. And while rain finally arrived in recent days, bringing some relief, it has also threatened to disrupt the harvest for those who waited. It is too early to know whether the drought could prompt China to import more wheat.
SpaceX is in the spotlight following the spat between President Trump and Elon Musk. Trump saying he'll pull government contracts for SpaceX, while Musk threatens to decommission the Dragon spacecraft. Could this shakeup affect the space race between the U.S., China, and Russia? Here to break down the national and geopolitical implications are two guests: Armin Kurdian, aeronautics expert and retired U.S. Navy captain, and Rick Fisher, senior fellow at the International Assessment and Strategy Center. And Armin, without SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft, would the U.S. become reliant on Russia to get to the ISS, for example, expanding on something you mentioned earlier? And how complicated would that be given, the close China-Russia relationship?
I wouldn't say that would basically put China necessarily in the lead. There are other commercial launch companies, Blue Origin and Rocket Lab out there. Boeing has its, I think, Starliner, although it's experienced a lot of issues in the United Launch Alliance. They're still having some problems trying to get that thing fully working. So there are other mechanisms, other companies that are actually out there, but SpaceX has kind of led the way. It would have a chilling effect on the economic potential of a lot of these rest of these companies. Concern from investors, well, if they nationalize SpaceX, are they going to nationalize this company, or is the government going to get its claws into other companies? And it would really kind of eliminate a lot of that venture capital that we've seen that has allowed commercial space exploration to happen. Let's remember that if we are going to go to Mars, then you're not going to simply be able to launch one rocket off the Earth and get there. You're going to have to build that space vehicle, a large space vehicle in low Earth orbit, and that's going to take a lot of multiple launches. It's going to take basically the type of effort that we used to go to the moon with Apollo 11. It's going to take that kind of effort going forward. And as an all hands on deck, we can't afford to be picking and choosing who's going to help in that endeavor.
And Rick, expanding on that, what does all of this mean in terms of the U.S.-China space competition?
Well, I certainly hope that the Musk-Trump spat is but a brief hiccup. SpaceX has revolutionized the space launch business. It is on the cusp of revolutionizing our access to the moon and perhaps Mars. It is a principal national asset in advancing the survival of our country. We simply cannot afford to cede the moon or Mars to China, and we're in a race with China to dominate the moon and Mars.
And Armin, zooming out a bit here, what would be best for both U.S. space readiness and geopolitical competition? What do you see as the solution here?
Honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with a public relations standpoint. It's still a lot of Americans simply don't grasp the importance and the vital necessity of space, because it is the future. We are who we are. Columbus crossed the ocean to America. Explorers all over the world throughout history have reached out beyond their comfort zone, and that's what we're doing right now, is reaching out beyond the Earth's atmosphere to other worlds and other planets, and ultimately the asteroid belt, and perhaps building further communities into space. So really, that story needs to be told more than anything else, even more than necessarily the advancement of technology. The story about the importance of space, the importance of getting back into space and staying there and not being absent for the 30 or 40 years that we were following the end of the Apollo program, even though we had the space shuttle there, limiting us to low Earth orbit. That story needs to be told. It's dynamic, it's exciting, and that's, I think, something that the whole country can get behind.
And Rick, your thoughts on what the best solution is here?
Well, the best solution is to continue the programs that have already been underway under NASA of going both to SpaceX and to Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin company to develop human landing systems, so that we have two options at a minimum. The exit of Musk and his kind of leadership over NASA offers the opportunity for NASA to focus more intently on the target of getting to the moon before Mars. It's the goal that we can achieve the soonest. It's the one that will have the most impact on Donald Trump's program to develop a Golden Dome, a national missile defense for the first time. In order for that missile defense to succeed, we'll have to be able to control upper Earth orbits. And that's going to start with making sure that we ensure our access to the moon and we're not locked out of the Earth-Moon-Mars system.
A lot at stake here for sure. Armin Kurdian, Rick Fisher, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.